It is so great to see you here today with us. My name is Jamie Campbell, and I'm the Manager of Alumni Engagement, Annual and Legacy Giving here at Georgian College. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to hear from Jonathan Andrews. Before we get started, we are going to begin our presentation today with our Indigenous land acknowledgement. Georgian College acknowledges that all campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Georgian College is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So on behalf of everyone here at Georgian College and our 90,000 proud Georgian grads around the world, it is my pleasure to welcome Jonathan Andrews to the call today to speak to us about a really important topic. And I guess, before we actually give the mic over to him, let's do that important part where we talk about how great he is and promote his excellence a little bit. So here's the bio that we've crafted for him, and I feel like I need to say that as great as I'm going to make him sound right now, he's actually so much greater. So I'll go with this. Georgian alumnus Jonathan Andrews, class of 2016, is a youth mental health champion and award-winning speaker who has combined his lived experiences with clinical depression and anxiety with skills obtained through his business entrepreneurship credential, creating a business for social good. He's the founder of Your Mental Health Ally and Project Circle Up, and has delivered over 100 presentations in the last 5 years to thousands of youth around the world. Helping to expand the conversation and reduce stigmas associated with mental health, his podcast, Project Circle Up, ranks on Listen Notes as one of the top 10% of shows globally. This past year, Jonathan released his first book, Man, You Know I Got You, which focuses on mental health and the conversations we have around them. And this same year, Jonathan was honored as a Colleges Ontario Premier's Award nominee by Georgian College for his work in the mental health space. And I've had the honor of reading the book. It is a great book, a great read. I'd certainly recommend it to everybody on the call. And we'll be giving away free copies of that book as well throughout the call and, of course, following the call today. But without further ado, before we do it over, I need to remind everyone, we are recording today's call, and it will be available for our students and alumni following the conversation today. And of course, when it comes to questions, Jonathan is ready to receive your questions. So feel free to use the Q&A option on the call, and we'll be collecting those questions, and Jonathan will be available to answer some of those questions after his presentation. So now, without further ado, I will turn the call over to Jonathan to get the conversation started.
Thanks, Jamie. Just give me a second here. So I'm looking at the gallery view, and I have you, Jamie, and I've got Kirsten here, but I don't have any of the participants. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I see all these beautiful faces? Or is it possible that nobody's on camera? Is that possible, Jamie?
It is possible, and Kirsten can play with it in the background to see if she's able to get them populated, but feel free to jump ahead and she'll see if she can work on it while you're chatting.
Jonathan, just to let you know, we are in webinar mode for this, so that just automatically turns everyone's cameras and microphones off, just to make for a more streamlined experience with the event, but everyone can interact with you via the chat and Q&A features throughout the presentation.
Okay, got it. Well, so that means that every participant as an attendee is off the hook, and that means Jamie and Kirsten, you're on the hook. And you don't have to get too nervous yet. I'll give you a second. For those of you that don't know me, Jamie, I really appreciate the introduction. This is just my take on the current state of mental health globally. The way I look at it, it's my personal philosophy. So if there's things that you disagree with, I'll ask you to kind of just sit with those and ask yourself, well, why do I not agree? And if there's things you agree with, you'll know why. But if there's things you don't agree with, just, sit with them, take them away and explore what is it possible that I can learn from this experience. I'm not saying this is the only way to look at mental health. It's just the way that I look at it. And my own personal philosophy is shaping and course correcting every single day. I'll start off by talking about why I believe mental health is so important and what it is. And to kick it off, I'm just, as I said, y'all are off the hook. So no worries. Jamie's on the hook. Kirsten's on the hook. This is what I want to do here. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to think about it. But what we're going to do is we're going to set a timer for 30 seconds. And then in those 30 seconds, you're going to show the group your best dance moves. So improv 2, you're going to stand up. You're going to do your best dance moves. I'm going to time 30 seconds. And then when the 30 seconds is done, you can sit down and we can talk about it. So Jamie, you'll be up first. Kirsten, you'll go second. I'll go third. You only have to dance for 30 seconds. So you've already got some encouragement. The people are saying they're glad that I can't see them. You're welcome, Laura. All right, so we're gonna hold up before we start. And I'm just gonna ask you, Jamie, how do you feel right now?
Well, Jonathan, I'm feeling very nervous. I'm feeling unsure of what's going to happen when I start to dance, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, great. And Kirsten, how do you feel?
I'm going to echo those sentiments. I'm usually just in the background on these events, so looking forward and slightly terrified to participate.
So slightly terrified, nervous, and I'm not going to make you dance. So you can go ahead and allow your whole system, your entire nervous system was just shifted. I want everyone to pay attention here from a state of relaxation to a state of fight or flight. Okay. And that's how powerful your mind is. What I just told you was a story. What I just told you was a thought. What I just told you was words that first were a thought and then actually changed the physiology of your body. So your entire system just shifted. And I want everyone to think, there's some people saying they were nervous for you, that made them cry, right? So I want you to think about how powerful your mind is. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to give you what I call $50 tips. So imagine you're a waiter and you just gave someone great service and then they slipped you a 50. How good would that feel? Right? So I'm going to give you some $50 tips here. The first one is stand guard at the door of your mind. So if you are making notes, this is a perfect time to do that. Stand guard at the door of your mind. What does that mean? It means over the last 2 years, there's been all sorts of stories and thoughts that you may agree with, you may not agree with. That's not the point. The point is that a single thought, like, hey, Jamie, I'm going to make you dance for 30 seconds, can impact the entire physiology of your body. And before we get into all the stories that made me who I am and why I care about mental health, I wanted to start with stand guard at the door of your mind, because you have two sides to your nervous system. Your parasympathetic state and your sympathetic state. Sympathetic is where Jamie just went, fight and flight. And what happens in your body is you immediately take all of the blood and energy that is in your internal organs, like your brain and your digestive system and your heart, and it moved out to your extremities so that you could fight or you can flee. And that's okay if there's a tiger in the room and you need to run away from it. But it's not okay if that's how you live your life. Day in, day out, you're in a state of perpetual fear, in a state of perpetual anxiety, in a state of perpetual doubt, and you're tense. And the challenge is that's how the vast majority of people are living their lives today, simply because of the way they think. So if you're wondering how powerful is a thought, it literally has the ability to take your body from a state of parasympathetic, rest and digest, to a state of sympathetic, fight and flight. And if y'all are living, if anyone here can resonate with that, that you're living your life in a state of fight and flight, simply by the thoughts you think, that I want to give you just a really quick opportunity to change that. So what we're going to do before we jump into my story is I want everyone to take a seat in their chair, kind of feel their butt on their chair, feel their posture, relax their body. Your posture is actually a reflex, so you don't need to do anything when you're sitting. Just relax. And what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you something that Olympic sprinters do to help transition their breathing. It's called a whisper count. And this has the ability, when your body and your physiology has transitioned out of rest and digest, to go back into it. So what we're going to do is, Jamie, if you want to do it with me, you're going to whisper count out. So your exhale is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You're not going to force it, but you're going to let it out. And that's your exhale. And then you're going to see, maybe for the first time in a long time, that your inhale is actually, you're receiving your inhale, which is the way you were designed to breathe. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's your exhale. And your inhale is just going to be through your nose. You're going to put the tongue at the roof of your mouth, and you're going to allow the inhale to happen. And what I want to do is, everyone's going to do this for 3 breaths. I wish I could see y'all. I'm not with y'all. I wish I could see y'all, but we're going to do it just Jamie and I for now, but I want you to follow along. So Jamie, we're going to do 3 breaths, and this is all it takes throughout your day to transition yourself from a state of sympathetic fight and flight to parasympathetic rest and digest, where your entire body is set up how it was designed. So, Jamie, you ready for me? So it's a whisper count out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, awesome. So for y'all who followed along, I hope you notice that on the inhale, you're able to actually expand your diaphragm the way it was designed, and that'll transition and trickle down in your whole body into a state of parasympathetic dominant state. And that's how I wanted to start, because the conversation that's been happening primarily in the last 2 years has been that you should be fearful. And I want to tell you how important it is to stand guard at the door of your mind, because the first time in my entire life where I was in a perpetual state of fear, in a perpetual state of anxiety, in a perpetual state of stress, was when I was 14 years old. When I was born as a boy, I was adventurous, I was enthusiastic, I was excited, the world was my oyster, I was driven, I was athletic, girls like me, things were cool. And when I went into high school, things changed for me. I actually experienced a pretty devastating downward spiral, and I was clinically diagnosed with depression, anxiety. And what happened? Well, when I was 11, one of my best friends, his name was Nick Rhino, and I used to play hockey with Nick, and his dad was super close to my family. He actually helped my dad build our deck in our backyard. He was a denturist, so he built my grandpa's dentures, and we used to play road hockey on Nick's street. So I used to see him all the time in his workshop, laughing and smiling and just enjoying himself. And one day, my teacher brought me into the library, and I was sitting beside 2 of my best friends, and she broke the news, and she said, Dean was found in his garage, and he was hanging from a rope. And that was the first time in my life where a man in my life took his own life. And the first time where I wasn't consciously thinking, oh, wow, mental health's important, but that I was exposed to that there was another world that I wasn't paying attention to, another relationship that I wasn't paying attention to, the relationship with my mental health. A couple of years went by, and I had a hard time grappling with what had happened. You know, I'm sure a lot of you can remember a time in your life where you had a little bit of a downward spiral. You know, I started hanging out with the wrong guys. I started experiencing a lot of questioning what was the point of life, like, what am I doing here? So I had a lot of doubt. I started doing drugs consistently. So I was smoking weed every single day. I stopped going to school. I stopped playing the sports that were important to me. So I wasn't moving my body as much. My sleep schedule was all screwed up because I stayed up all night on my computer. And then when it was time to wake up in the morning, I didn't have any energy. My nutrition was horrible. I was eating chocolate chip pancakes every single day, eating like 7 or 8 granola bars, even though the chewy dip granola bars are my favorite. I was eating so many of them every day. So you could just see how like cascading. And now when I look back, it was poor judgment for a lot of those things. But the challenge that I was experiencing was worsening and worsening and worsening. Eventually it got to the point where, you know, kind of it felt like the sun wasn't shining for me anymore. And I had these big existential questions about Dean, where it was like, I just saw you laughing and I just saw you smiling. Like, how could this happen? It got so bad to the point where I spent more time in bed than I did going to school. And my parents finally kind of interrupted this pattern, brought me to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety. I was given antidepressants. And all I can say from that experience was that it made it worse. Because the symptoms that my body was expressing, like anxiety, depression, was trying to communicate something to me. Something wasn't working. Something wasn't right. So the symptom, it's actually a message. It's a conversation. And I took these antidepressants that did the same thing that the drugs were doing. And it did the same thing that the food was doing. And it did the same thing that the video games were doing. And that was to quiet the conversation, to numb the conversation. Right? So I wouldn't feel as much. I needed to feel more. Eventually, it got so bad that I started to cut myself. And I started to think about taking my own life. And I would imagine myself in that garage taking Dean's place. I remember the day that turned that all around. And here's another $50 tip for you. Jim Rohn once said, you can't change the destination of your life overnight, but you can change the direction. He said, you can't change the destination of your life overnight, but you can change the direction. And this is what happened to me. It was 7 a.m. in the morning. My alarm went off. Like I had every other day, I unplugged it and tried to go back to sleep. My dad came in my room like he had every single day for months, committed to getting me out of bed and into class. And we fought back and forth like we did every single day. Some days I'd win, some days he'd win, some days I'd go to school, some days I'd stay in bed. And he finally gave up after about an hour and he said, I fucking had it. And he stormed out of the room. And I'm thinking, I just won, so I get to go back to sleep. So I roll over to go back to bed. And next thing you know, he busts back in the room, this time with a big bucket of water. And he literally launches the entire thing on me. And I'm drenched. Holy shit. A wake-up call. And he sits down on the side of my bed. And I'm shocked. And he looks me in the eyes and he says, son, I don't know what you're going through, but I will sit here as long as you need. You're not alone. You will never be alone. And that was the wake-up call that made me realize that someone actually gave a fuck. He wanted me to do well. I finally saw what was there the whole time. And that feeling that he gave me is what my journey about mental health has been about over the last decade. The feeling he gave me was that, you know, I got you. No matter what, I got your back. No matter what, I'm here for you. And so my journey in mental health for the last 10 years has been about, how do I create that feeling that he gave me? How do I show other people that they're not alone? Right? How do I make them know without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what they go through, that someone has their back? Don't give up. We're here for you. You're not alone in this. And that led me down a massive rabbit hole in the mental health space. But I just want y'all to remember that if you're writing notes, you can't change the destination of your life overnight, but you can change the direction, and you don't know what it's going to be. Sometimes it takes only one person who cares enough to change your world. And he did for me that day. That's what this book was designed for. Man, you know, I got you. Right? Because that feeling of, you know, I got you is what changed my life ultimately. And gave me the inspiration and the hope to be able to turn my experience that could have looked at as, you know, something terrible that happened to me, but instead use it as fuel and inspiration to be able to go out in the world and be able to talk about it and to be able to share about it and say, hey, you know what, I went through this. And actually, I used to think that this is very vulnerable to share. I used to think that because my experience was so simple, it was just like, hey, I started doing drugs, hanging out with the wrong guys, didn't sleep very well, didn't eat very well. You know, I had this kind of, you know, existential questionings and doubts about what's the point of this whole thing, that it wouldn't be relatable for a lot of people. Like I didn't experience anything super major and drastic. And it turns out that it's not the case, because anybody can struggle with their mental health, because everybody has mental health. And so that led me on a 10-year journey, which I'll get into now really briefly before I give you some other tips and tricks about mental health. The first thing that happened was I found personal development. So for those of you that are making notes, write this name down, Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn. I found Jim Rohn, and Jim Rohn said, you can have more than you've got because you can become more than you are. And he said, unless you change how you are, you'll always have what you got. And that stuck. That made sense. It's like, shit, unless I change how I am, I'm going to be depressed. Unless I change how I am, I'm going to have anxiety. Unless I change how I am, I'm not going to want to get out of bed. So he said, you can have more than you've got if you can become more than you are. And so that was my journey. Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N. Jim Rohn. If you type in to YouTube, learn this skill or live a mediocre life, that is the most important personal development video that I've ever watched in my entire life. And Jim is hilarious. So you will not, there you go. Thank you. I appreciate it, Jamie. Jim Rohn passed in 2009, but he was one of the most important mentors of my life. My dad had my back, and then I opened my eyes to stand guard at the door of your mind. Well, I stood guard at the door of my mind and let really positive thoughts and influences come in. And that shifted my entire direction. I was planning on taking a year off, my second year off after high school, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. All my friends went to university. All my friends went and they had, you know, ideas of what they want to do. I had no idea. And my sister went to Ryerson, didn't like the program, and then decided she was going to go to the business entrepreneurship program at Georgian. And she said, you should come. And then I said, okay. So I went to Georgian, and that was one of the most important experiences of my life. So thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Georgian. I appreciate y'all. I wanted to find out how I could take what I had been through with my mental journey and turn it into an opportunity where I could, live off of it and create an income where I could sustain myself and inspire people through my experience. And I was able to do that. But Georgian was if you could become more than you are, you can have more than you've got. I went to Georgian to become more than I was, to learn something about myself, to learn about the world, so I could go into the world and I could actually make a difference. So y'all that go to Georgian, good idea, great thinking. That led me to getting my first gig. And here's another $50 tip. This is one of my favorite ones. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. If you work hard on your job, you can make a living. If you work hard on yourself, you can make a fortune. So I got a cool job in the city of Toronto. I moved to the city, but those were the words that were ruminating. Those were the thoughts that were ruminating in my mind. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And so what I decided to do was I got a membership at Toastmasters. It's just a leadership communication development organization. I thought to myself, if I go learn how to be a better communicator, that would help me in my sales job. And it did. And then it found, through trying to work harder on myself than I did in my job, I found an organization called Venture for Canada. And they trained me on more entrepreneurial skills. And then finally, I found this organization. Where is it? There it is. Jack.org. And they were Canada's #1 youth charity that was raising awareness and education for youth mental health. And that was when all the stars of my experience of why did I go through what I went through. You're probably asking yourself something like that. When you're going through a challenging time in your life, why am I going through what I'm going through? And all of the stars aligned for me when I found Jack.org. Because they were going into high schools and universities and they were talking to young people about how important it was to pay attention to your mental health, how important it was to have conversations about mental health, to know how to take care of yourself, to know how to take care of your peers. And then because I was working hard on myself, I had developed some skills like communication, and they said, hey, we want you to come volunteer for us. We want you to be a speaker. And I got an opportunity to speak to tens of thousands of students and do over 100 presentations about youth mental health education. And I want to share with you the biggest things that I learned. And it starts off with what's happening right now in the world of mental health. Well, for youth mental health, between the ages of 15 and 24, suicide is the #1 health-related cause of death for young people. That's the situation we're in right now. 15 to 24, suicide is the #1 health-related cause of death for young people. So the question begets, is this an important conversation for us to be having? And the answer is absolutely. So again, kudos to Georgian for putting this together. Kudos for you for being here and caring about this, because you don't know when you'll need it and you don't know when somebody else in your life will need it. Then I started joining the space talking about men's mental health, and a man dies by suicide every minute. And 75% of suicides in Canada are men. And so if that's the landscape, then the questions come up of like, why is it happening? And how do men get away with it? And how do people get away with that? Like, as in, how do the people around them not know that this is happening? And then what to do about it. And that's why I wrote this book. It was designed to be a 10-week course, and it was designed to be a weekend seminar. So I'm giving you 45 minutes of what I have to offer of what was supposed to be a weekend seminar and a 10-week course. So I will share what I believe is most relevant for the last 15 to 20 minutes that we have here. what the most important thing for us to remember leaving this talk is, the most important thing, is inside of a statistic, like 1 in 4 people will struggle with their mental health. The most important takeaway for us is, what about the other 3? Does it mean they don't have mental health? Of course not. If 1 in 4 struggle, it doesn't mean that the other 3 don't have mental health. It just means they're not struggling. So the most important thing for us to remember leaving this conversation is that every single person has mental health. If you ever wondered, does this conversation apply to me? Is it important for me? The answer is yes. Does it apply to my kids? Is it important for them to know about this? The answer is yes. Does it apply to my staff? Does it matter to them? The answer is yes. Every single person has mental health. The question isn't, do you have it or not? The question is, where are you on this mental health spectrum at any given moment in your life? That's the question. Where am I on the spectrum at any given moment in your life? And the reason why I like starting with this conversation about parasympathetic versus sympathetic state and breathing is because when you pay attention to your breath, you get a really strong signal overall of how you're doing. Are your breaths shallow? Are they forced? Are they choppy? Or are they smooth and graceful and elongated and easy and flowing? Right? So your breath, you could stop and think about it and pay attention to the state of my breathing, and then consciously go into improving it by doing the whisper count breathing 2 times a day, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, as many times as you need. And this is just a check-in. How am I doing? And now what I want you to do is imagine a vertical scale. So up and down, so like the spine of this book. And at the top is healthy or thriving. And then a little further down is stressed, right? Like Jamie when I asked him to dance for 30 seconds. Down here is struggling. And then further down is crisis. This is our vertical spectrum of mental health. Remember, the question isn't, do you have mental health or not? The question is, where are you on the spectrum at any given moment in your life? And different things that happen to us impact where we are, from our day-to-day habits and routines. Like when I was a high school student, I wasn't eating well. I wasn't sleeping well. I was doing drugs. I was hanging out with the wrong crew. So my actual daily habits did impact my mental health without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, so if you're asking yourself, is what I do on a day-to-day basis, like the food that I eat, the thoughts that I think, the quality of sleep that I get, who I hang out with, the people I spend my time with, does it matter? You know the answer. So that's one part. And then there's things that happen, right? You could lose your job. You could lose somebody that you love, right? These are things that happen that impact our mental health. And now here's another $50 tip for you. Where you end up in life has less to do with the wind and more to do with the set of your sail. Where you end up has less to do with the wind and more to do with the set of your sail. What does that mean? It means that the wind of life blows on everybody. The political wind, the social wind, the economic wind, tragedy, failure, loss. Everyone has their own unique experience without a shadow of a doubt. But the wind of life blows on all of us. So the question of where you end up has less to do with the wind and more to do with how you set your sail. How you set your sail. So I want you to think of your mental health and your thoughts, because what is mental health? It's the health of your thoughts, the health of your thinking. I want you to think of it like the set of the sail on a sailboat. There's 10 boats in the water, right? 10 different people, and the wind's blowing on all of them. And where the boat ends up has to do with how they set the sail, right? If one sets its sail this way, it's going this way. Once it sets it this way, it's going this way. So when you ask yourself of how is my life going to end up? How am I going to do financially, physically, emotionally, relationships, all of it. Less to do with the wind, more to do with the set of your sail. And what is the set of your sail? It's your personal philosophy, how you look at the world, how you look at your life. What's the quality of your thoughts, right? Two people see the same thing. One sees a cup and the other one sees a muse for poetry, right? So depending on who you are and how you look at it and your experiences, you will look at the world in a different way. So I'm going to challenge every single person here is if you want to improve one thing in your life that will cascade into your relationships, into your finances, into how you experience the world, it's the set of your sail. It's your personal philosophy. It's the quality of your thoughts. And how do you do that? Well, we'll get into that. So remember this vertical spectrum: healthy, stressed, struggling, crisis. The reason why we're talking about it this way, that everyone has mental health, and the question is, where are you on the spectrum, is to eliminate the stigma that gets in the way for you asking for help when you need it. Stressed, great place to ask for help. Struggling, great place to ask for help. In crisis, you will be out of control and unable to ask for help. So this is the sweet spot right here. And ideally, in a healthy state is when you'll create the structure and the containers that will be available to you when you need help. Because when you need help is when you're the least likely to ask for it. I should make that a $50 tip. When you need help is when you're least likely to ask for it, when you're stressed and struggling. And why is that? It's because we have a stigma. I don't want people to think I'm weak. I don't want people to think that, I have some sort of, mental problem. I don't want people to think. Once you separate this conversation into everyone has mental health, and that you learn that asking for help is actually the strongest thing you can do, needing the most courage, then you realize and you can take full ownership of that conversation, this dialogue of asking for help when I need it and being there and taking a stand for people when they need it. Because it's going to be uncomfortable. And why is that? Because we have stigma. So let's erase that. Let's get rid of that. How do we do it? We just relate it to physical health. It's the easiest way. So Jamie, can you come on the speaker for a second? I'm not going to make you dance. Don't worry, dude.
Shoes are on just in case.
Okay, he's got his tap shoes, baby. All right. So let's say you cut your finger. Share with us, what would you do?
Depending on the size of the cut, I'd probably grab a cloth, wipe it, bandage it up, and get back to work.
Thank you. So context dependent, right? How big is the cut? So if something happens in your life, you ask yourself, context dependent, how big is the cut, right? How big is the wound? In the book, one of the major ways that I create an analogy and connection is talking about battlefields and the warrior spirit, right? You're on the battlefield of your life, something happens, you get injured. All right, now we go create the space where we can heal from injury. So the cut on Jamie's finger wasn't that big, so he's going to take care of himself. Okay, so you're healthy, maybe a little bit stressed, but you take care of the bandage and then you can go back up, right? Excellent. Now, Jamie, come back on here. What happens if you were walking down the street and you rolled your ankle and you thought it might be broken, it swells up, it gets massive, you're in tons of pain? What are you going to do?
I'm going to ask for help if I'm not close enough to drag myself somewhere. So yeah, we're asking for help.
Yeah, like where are you going to drive?
Yeah. we're gonna go for help and probably ending up at the hospital.
So he can't drive himself because if he puts his foot on the brake, it might hurt his foot more and he might get into an accident. And he's going to see a professional whose job was to help people who are struggling with their physical health. Does that make sense? Right?
Perfect sense.
So I want to just make that comparison because if I'm feeling stressed, I can take care of myself. If I've developed the practices and the disciplines and the self-care rituals to take care of myself. I have more than a dozen that if I needed some sort of an uplifting or a grounding, I could pull up that practice, which would be the equivalent of me putting the Band-Aid on my finger. Now, if I'm struggling with my mental health, I also have places for that. Now, you could use a psychologist, you could use a psychotherapist, you could use your men's team or your AA group if you're struggling with an addiction like alcoholism. You can use your family, right? These are support systems that are designed, community supports that you can intentionally set up to be there for you when you're struggling. So once you dip below stress is when you start to think about community supports and professional supports. Does that make sense?
It does.
And crisis is different because the challenge with crisis is the whole definition of crisis is that you're out of control. So here's something that happened to me back in 2013. I had lifeguard training back then. My parents, I did basically everything my sister did. She went to Georgian College. I went to Georgian College. She swam, I swam, and she went and learned to be a lifeguard. So I did the same training as her. And so I knew what to do if somebody who had an incident. And I was standing at a Home Depot line picking up flowers for my mom. She asked me to get them, so it wasn't like a great son or anything like that. And somebody in the line who I was talking to collapsed. And she was like, I have a pacemaker, I have a pacemaker. I think I'm having a heart attack. And instantly, the day went from a beautiful sunny day to picking up flowers to a crisis situation. Now, how many of you think that Julie, who was laying on the floor, clutching her chest, unable to breathe, is in a good position to take care of herself? Or even a good position to ask for help? She's out of control, right? She isn't. There's like, to expect somebody that's out of control to do the logical things to take care of themselves doesn't make any sense. Right. So fortunately I was there and I said, hey, yo, man, like defibrillator, please call 911, please, everybody out of the way. I'm going to just like be here with her. And the ambulance came and they took it over. Now, here's another part to consider. How poor judgment would it have been for me to be like, I'm a lifeguard, so I can take care of it. I got you, Julie, don't worry. And try to be the one that takes care of her rather than calling a professional, right? Like if you're having a crisis with your mental health, you can call a crisis line like Jamie posted in the chat. Right? So part of that is just knowing your role. Right? So my role in my mental health is that nobody else is responsible for mental health but me. Right? I set the sail. Right? The wind of life's going to blow on everybody, but I set the sail. It's my responsibility to ask for help when I'm stressed and struggling. You know, a lot of times I've been like, don't they see that I'm struggling? Why haven't they reached out to me? But it's like people are consumed with what's going on in their lives. I'm struggling, so I'm not reaching out to anybody else to be like, hey, how are you doing? Because I'm struggling. So your personal responsibility with your own mental health is to take ownership and take responsibility for it and to ask for help when you need it and to put yourself in a position to be supported before you even need it, right? That's why I have a men's team. Right? I show up at the men's team and everyone's like, Andrews, you look like shit. What's going on? Right? I've put myself in a position where support is part of my life. So you have that opportunity before you ever need it to be supported. And the other element is, how do I be there for other people in a way that works? right? I don't want to ruffle too many feathers and be like, what's going on? And maybe not my place. Maybe you might be a boss in a workplace. You don't really know if that's appropriate or right. And you could go too far, which is trying to fix people's problems and the challenges of their lives and get consumed by it, right? Or pretend you're a professional when you're not, unless you are, in which case do your job, right? And so there's this line where when it comes to yourself, you need to remember that you're the one that's responsible. Nobody else can take ownership for you. We want to be there and we want to help and we want to support and we need to know when you're struggling, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. And then when it comes to other people, how do you be there for somebody? My favorite resource is to go to bethere.org. I'm going to allow the laughter to subside. My favorite resource is bethere.org. So I'll put that in the chat, bethere.org. This is also in my book, but it is a video series designed to teach you how to be there for other people in your life. It teaches the golden rules. Essentially, the golden rules can be summed into an idea that I put into my book called ruthless compassion. So I want you to imagine this really briefly. You're a warrior and you're on the battlefield of your life and you got injured. You took an arrow. You fought honorably. You did everything that your training was designed to teach you to do so you could be there for your brothers. You could be there for your family. You could fight courageously to defend what you care about, what your purpose is, and you got injured, whatever that was. And when you leave the battlefield, now you've got an arrow. Well, what we expect today is for people to go right back onto the battlefield, injured, never healing. And instead of, hey, let's give them the space to be able to pull this. Let's give them the space to know that we give a shit about them and that we're going to give them the time and energy. Instead, we give them, hey, here's some antidepressants. Go back out there. Hey, here's some painkillers. Go back out there. Hey, here's a new Netflix series you can watch so that you don't have to confront what's happening in your life. Go back out there. And I'm not knocking any of those things. The purpose of those things was designed, number one, Netflix for entertainment, which is awesome. And the others were designed for emergencies. But how long are you going to be in that emergency state is the question. How long are you going to be in that fight or flight response is the question. When are you going to enter the state of healing? And in order to heal, you need to feel. So the ruthless compassion comes in because, hey, when somebody comes off the battlefield, you need compassion. Someone needs to hold them. Who's going to hug them and love them and take care of them and cook them a meal because they can't do it for themselves because they have a broken arm? That's compassion. The challenge with compassion, though, is if there's no ruthlessness, then you hold them, you love them, you support them, but you never look them square in the eye and say, hey, Jamie, you've got an arrow in your shoulder. When are we going to pull that? Do you know you have an arrow in your shoulder? Because I know you can't feel it because you've been drinking every night. I know you can't feel it because your doctor prescribed you pain medications and you've been taking them every day. I know you can't feel it because you're on the antidepressants. And if we want to heal, we need to feel. What you least likely want to do, which is, hey, I'm struggling, ask for help, is what is most necessary. So to come back to this concept as we close this off and give you an opportunity to ask some questions that you might want to ask, man, you know, I got you, this feeling of, you know, I got you, this ruthless compassion, right? My dad pouring the bucket of water on me, right? Waking me up. That was the ruthlessness mixed with the compassion of him being there day in and day out, right? This feeling, what I want to share with you leaving here is to make the hardest thing as easy as possible. So if you want to write that one down, make the hardest thing as easy as possible. So as an example, the hardest thing to do when you're struggling with your mental health is to ask for help, to be supported, to let somebody take care of you. So how can you make that as easy as possible? Well, that's why we wrote this book. It's called Man, You Know I Got You, Why the Future of Men's Mental Health and Masculinity Are Not Man Up, but Circle Up. Don't take it on alone. Circle up, come together, be in community, create the space before you ever need it, right? The men's team happens every single Monday. Why? Because if I feel, whether I feel like it or not, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be confronted. So this book is about making the hardest thing to do as easy as possible. For those of you that don't know Juice WRLD, important figure in my life, Juice WRLD was, he still has over 30 million Spotify monthly active listeners as one of the most famous and popular rappers of all time. He died at 21. He died at a Percocet overdose. And one of the songs that was released after he died, called Wishing Well, he wrote, "This is the part where I tell you I'm fine, but I'm lying. I just don't want you to worry. This is the part where I take all my feelings and hide them, because I don't want no one to hurt me." And we wear that mask and we hide the pain from the world and we don't ask for help. And there's people that give a shit about us. There are people that want us to do well. There's people that would have our backs if they knew we needed it. My parents only knew because I was in their house. And I went from the kid that loved to play sports and was alive to one that couldn't get out of bed, so it could have been more obvious. So where in your life is the question that you're telling everyone you're fine, but you're lying because you don't want them to worry? And where are you taking all your feelings and hiding them because you don't want anyone to hurt you? That's the question that I want to ask you leaving this conversation. That's the question I want you to leave with, is how can you actually feel more? And here's a really good one for you, $50 tip. The same door that keeps out disappointment is the same door that keeps out happiness. So if we're avoiding feeling with whatever way it is that you do that, because I know what I do to avoid feeling. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that the only time that I heal, the only time that I level up, the only time that I'm able to move on and create more self-expression and more purpose and more aliveness and more enjoyment of my life is when I let the walls down of disappointment. I really feel. And I go into that because that's where the healing happens. There's like 40 more stories that I want to tell y'all, but I can't. So I'm not going to. But I appreciate every single one of you for being here. If y'all want to support jack.org, which is youth #1 charity for mental health awareness and youth mental health awareness, you could buy a book of Man, You Know I Got You at manyouknowigotyou.com. Every single dollar of profit is donated to jack.org. So thanks y'alls for being here. I'm going to type in my Instagram in the chat. So if you want to add me on Instagram, love to connect with you there. You can see my adventures out in Mexico and what I'm up to these days. Appreciate y'all. I'm going to hand it back to Jamie, but much love. If y'all have questions, I'd love to answer them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jonathan. And I know that I'm probably not alone in saying how great that presentation was, and watching the chat box throughout that conversation. I think there's a lot of gratitude on the call for the tips that you've shared with people. And you've really got us thinking about how we're monitoring our own state of thought. We do have really great comments happening in the chat menu, and we do have a question in the chat box. Actually, they've actually asked if you would mind running through the breathing exercise one more time, so that they can help master it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way the breath was designed was that your inhale is designed to be a reflex. Just like your posture is not something I have good posture because I sit up straight and I force myself into that position. Posture is actually a reflex. So however you sit is your posture. when you're fully relaxed. So keep that in mind. If you're not sitting very well, it means there's some things you can do to improve that. And the number one thing you can do is to learn how to breathe how you were designed to breathe. And that is with a smooth, elongated, deep exhale. And there's all sorts of ways you could do that. A lot of people in the spiritual community like to om, right? And that what it does is your diaphragm now ascends very slowly and evenly. And then after you're done exhaling, give yourself a second, pause, and then the inhale will be there waiting for you, and it will happen. It's not something that you pull in. What happens when you're in a state of fight or flight? The tiger's in the room, for whatever reason, is you pull in your inhale. You force it in because you need the air. I need to fight. I need to run. That is not how we want to live our lives on a day-to-day basis. That is the state where if after you fight the lion, you don't go back to the cave and rest and heal, you will create disease. You will create depression. You will create inner turmoil in your system because it's not balanced. So what can you do to combat that? Very simple. Practice your exhale and let your inhale happen. And over time, you will find that your breathing will improve. And a couple of cues I can give you. So for those of you that want to try this, the most important things you could do is number one, breathe through your nose. Number two, put your tongue where it was designed to sit when you're breathing. And that's at the roof of your mouth. So swallow and close your mouth. That's the position it was designed for. And now exhale in whatever way works for you, but this is called whisper counting. And you can practice all sorts of different ways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you just go until it stops. Don't force it. And then pause for a second and allow the inhale. Feel the lower parts of your lungs filling up because you breathe into your belly and into your back and into your lower ribs. That is where, if you're in a state of restoration, right? That's where your breathing will go. So I'll do one with y'all because it's nice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is so beautiful. You can practice that 5 minutes a day. Set a stopwatch, practice it 5 minutes a day. Super, super, super easy. Really great way to heal your diaphragm, which is your primary breathing muscle. And if your diaphragm works properly, the rest of your work will really thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. We have another question for you, and I know that some folks have to jump off the call now, so I'm happy to share that for all the students on the call today, the Alumni Association has purchased a number of books and will be giving all the students a copy of Jonathan's book to support their own mental health, and we will be awarding some random books for prizes as well to the people who have attended the session today. And of course, Jonathan shared all the proceeds from his book, supportjack.org, a very important cause for him and for so many people. We have another question for you, Jonathan, and this one asks, what would you say is the best phrase that someone can say to those who appear to be struggling but may not know? I know there have been times where I can see those around me in need, but not knowing the best way to reach out to them.
Excellent question. There's no magic phrase, but I can give you 2 really easy tips from jack.org, which is the golden rules, the first 2. So the first one is say what you see. Okay. And this is very important. There's what happens in life and there's what you make it mean. And they're not the same circle. It's not a Venn diagram. They don't intersect. There's what happens and then there's what you make it mean. And so when we approach someone that we care about, it's very important that we don't collapse what we see and what we think it means. So that just means say what you see. So as an example, let's say you're a teacher and one of your students who's typically on time every day, taking care of himself, he's just, he's, freshened up, looks good, he had a shower, etc., shows up on time. And then consistently now for a week, he's either not there, disheveled, not on time. So something's changed, right? Or in this example, somebody in your life is expressing your concern that the way they're living is changed, or that they're expressing things that they may be struggling. The most important thing you can do is to say, hey, John, hey, Jamie, I noticed that you haven't been coming to class on time, and you typically do. What's going on? I just want you to know I'm here for you. I care about you. What's happening? It's not, hey, Jamie, I think you might be depressed because you're not showing up on time anymore to class. Did your girlfriend break up with you? Right? It's not what I think it means. It's just what I see. That's it. This is what I see. And the second thing is to show you care. And there's a big difference between intellectually thinking it'd be nice to care and actually giving a shit. Right? So the most important thing you could do is say you care. Hey, I just want to let you know I really care about you. That's why I'm having this conversation. If I didn't care, I wouldn't say anything. I love you. I care about you. This is what I see. What's going on? They may not want to talk to you, and that is okay. They may not be ready for it. They might not have the words to describe it. Maybe the setting you're in isn't appropriate to have the conversation. Maybe it's not private enough. Maybe they don't feel safe. Maybe you're not the person that they should talk to, right? But then actually listening, right? You can learn a lot from someone not saying anything. It means, maybe they're not prepared, or they could really want. So I'm just gonna, this is something that I would have loved to have shared in the talk, but I'm gonna share now because it's Q&A. There's this amazing child story called "There's No Such Thing as a Dragon." It's awesome. The story goes, Billy Bixby wakes up one morning and he sees a dragon at the side of his bed. And it's wagging its tail. It's super cute. So he pats it on the head and it's super excited. And he goes downstairs to tell his mom, hey, there's a dragon. And she says, looking at it, there's no such thing as a dragon. They're both looking at it. And he's like, okay. And he goes back upstairs and the dragon wags its tail at him. And unlike before, he doesn't pat the dragon on the head because he says, if there's no such thing as something, it's stupid to pat it on the head. So he doesn't acknowledge it. By the time he brushes his teeth and goes back downstairs, the dragon grew from the size of a kitten to the size of a dog. And he goes to eat breakfast and eats pancakes, but the dragon keeps eating all the pancakes. And he says, hey, Mom, the dragon's eating all my pancakes. And his mom says, there's no such thing as a dragon. Later in the book, it keeps growing and growing and growing as they don't acknowledge the dragon in the room. So it goes from the size of a kitten to the size of a dog to the size of Billy to the size of the hallway, and then eventually the size of the entire house, and it runs away with the house. And the moral of the story is when Billy's dad comes home and he says, hey, what happened to my household? Where'd my house go? Why did this happen? Billy goes to say it was the dragon. And then his mom, before she could say there's no such thing, he said, there is a dragon. And he pats it on the head. And all of a sudden it goes from this massive dragon to small as a kitten. So the moral of the story being, what's your dragon? What are you avoiding acknowledging? Right? Because if somebody doesn't want to have a conversation with you, it just means they have a dragon in their life that they're avoiding, a dragon in their life that they're not wanting to talk about, that they don't want to confront because they know it's going to be uncomfortable. But we know now after this conversation that the only way to heal is if you feel it, is if you actually acknowledge the dragon in your life that's taking over your life. Much easier. His mom says, I think I can handle dragons this big. Much easier to handle the kitten-sized dragon than the one that takes over your life. So to answer your question, number one, say what you see, not what you think it means. Number two, show you care. And some people might not be ready to talk about the dragon in their life yet, but if you actually care, you'll show up consistently with no pressure, just creating the safe space and the safe container that when they're ready to talk about it, unless it's a crisis, in which case you don't have a choice but to take a stand for somebody and be ruthless.
Thanks, Jonathan. We've got time for one more question, and it asks, do you have any tips for taking that first step towards turning the sail in a different direction?
Yeah, definitely. So Rohn used to say, life is like the seasons. Life is like the seasons. There's spring, summer, fall, winter. What we're experiencing globally right now is a winter season. It's hard, it's cold, it's tough. People lost their jobs, right? People experiencing more depression than they ever have. If you're struggling, you're in a winter. The current state of our mental health in Canada and in the world is a winter. So I want you to think of the state we're in as like the harvest. So you have a tree and it produces apples. The apple is the fruit. It's the harvest. It's what happens at the end. So if you want to look at what's wrong, you don't go look at the apple. So we can't just look at the state of our mental health and be like 75% suicides. I mean, there's something wrong. It's like, no, we have to backtrack. What were the seeds? What were the seeds that were being planted in the springtime? Because if you plant kale, you can't get an apple tree. So if you want to know what you can do to help the sail, you need to know what seeds you're planting. And those are thoughts. Thoughts are the seeds. Thinking is the seeds. So if you want to know how to get a better personal philosophy, you need to stand guard at the door of your mind. That's what we started at it. You can read my book. You can listen to Rohn. You can go to all sorts of different places and avenues to have better thinking. The easiest thing you can do is turn off the news. Stop listening to the news. And like just the most serious I could be, turn the news off. The seeds you are planting into your minds is doubt and fear. And choose intentionally to plant different seeds in your mind. Because what happens when you plant a seed is that in the summertime, you need to water it and you need to take care of it, right? You have to take care of the good you start, right? So you could start reading my book, but if you don't finish it, you never went into the summer and you never watered it, right? You didn't take care of the good that you started. And then come fall time is harvest, right? If you plant seeds of kale in the spring, you can't get apples in the fall. So what kind of, you can just look at the results in your life right now as the harvest, the fall time, right? That's the state of our mental health. So we need to look at what are the seeds we've been planting into the minds of our people. And that is the primary purpose of chapter 1. I can't talk about why I believe all of the reasons why we struggle with their mental health. And it was, like I said, it was designed for a weekend seminar in a 10-week program. So that is what I would give you as feedback is go into, stand guard at the door of your mind. Think about what seeds you're planting, what seeds are you allowing in, and you'll have a different harvest come fall time. Your philosophy, how you look at the world, will change depending on the seeds that you plant in the doors of your mind. And I would say the easiest way, $50 tip for y'all, $50 tip is, what was I going to say? Oh, great point. So I said that you can't change the destination of your life overnight, but you can change the direction. Now, the only thing worse than the wrong direction is no direction. The only thing worse than the wrong direction is no direction. So if you don't have a purpose, if you don't have a direction for your life, if you don't have a vision for what you want, then you are allowing doubt to creep into your life. Don't let doubt creep in. Have a vision. Know what you want. The only thing worse than having the wrong direction, you're like, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I don't do the right thing? Like the only thing worse than that is having no direction, because you can course correct. Hope that helps. $50 tips, baby. Goodbye, Laura.
Thanks, Jonathan. And I think the four season piece, what resonated to me as well in the back of my mind as I'm listening to you speak about that spring, summer, fall harvest piece is, the effort we put in those 3 seasons helps to make us more resilient when the winter comes. So, it prepares for that.
No doubt. Absolutely. You'll find out whether or not you did a great job the rest of the seasons when winter comes.
And on that note, I believe that brings us to the end of the presentation today. I know we've had some fantastic comments in the chat menu, and emails have already started coming through as well, messages of thanks for today's conversation. I think you've really impacted a lot of people today, and that impact will continue because I'm seeing people sharing that they're sending the books to their children, and this conversation, I imagine, will continue to resonate far past today's conversation. So thank you for your time. And I will share that on behalf of our Alumni Association, we do make a gift to Georgian College as well from all of our speakers to support student scholarships and emergency bursaries. So there will be a gift made today in honor of Jonathan. And for everybody on the call, if you'd like more information about the Georgian College Alumni Association, feel free to visit us at georgiancollege.ca/alumni, and you'll be able to find more information about Jonathan on our website as well. On behalf of everybody here at Georgian, Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us. And for everybody else on the call, thanks for joining us, and stay well.
Appreciate you, man. Circle out.
Circle up.